Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure always to follow the Honourable Gentleman from North East Fife. I agreed with what he said about 0.7% of UK aid. He's dead right. That is one of the great achievements of this government, actually, since 2010. I was interested in his point about working out detail before a referendum has happened, instead of in the last few weeks of it, the detail of that. I wonder whether we will hear the detail worked out from the SNP before their next independence referendum as to whether they will want to keep the pound and what their plan is to keep the pound. I'd be happy to take an intervention from their leader in the House here to hear that.
I'm most grateful, and I have to say I'll commend the honourable gentleman for the tone at the start of his speech. Let me give an absolute cast-iron commitment that when the SNP brings forward its plans for independence, as we will very shortly, we will set out in exact detail the kind of country that we want and have an open discussion with friends and opponents as to what kind of society that we want to live in.
I take that as no answer on the pound. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I just want to warmly welcome the Queen's speech of yesterday and the fact that we have at last opened a new session of Parliament. With 26 bills to be getting on with as well, so all the more, and of course all the more immediate Brexit endgame stuff to play out. And I won't labour them all, but I just want to touch on a few. As a former health minister, not least, I welcome plans for this independent NHS investigations body, which was talked about when I was in the department, for a new independent NHS HSIB, as it's called, to look into serious healthcare incidents. There's other measures that we're going to bring forward around adult social care and medicines policy. As a former minister in the medicines area, I look forward to scrutinising that. Very much welcome, Mr Deputy Speaker, the ambitious new policies on criminal justice. It was good to hear the Prime Minister yesterday talk about the rehabilitation of offenders during his remarks in the House. And far from the environment being an afterthought in this Queen's speech, I didn't see it that way at all. I'm delighted to see a new environment bill which promises to set legally binding targets to reduce the plastics, to cut air pollution, to restore biodiversity and improve water quality. And as promised, the Animal Welfare Bill to outlaw the proceeds of trophy hunting. I think that's very welcome as well, Mr Deputy Speaker. I only wish we could outlaw the actual act as it happens in other countries, which, if you ask me, shows a darkness in the heart of man, which we should leave firmly in the past. I think these are good measures on the environment. My Green Winchester campaign, which I've run now since before I was elected, will look forward to getting stuck into all of that. I know there'll be a lot of interest from my constituents on it. So I just want to touch on three things, if I may, Mr Speaker. Firstly, Brexit and citizens' rights, which I've spoken about in this chamber many times since we had the referendum result. In my opinion, Britain cannot have any secure place in the world if it is not a secure place that welcomes citizens from anywhere in the world. Now, of course, it's good news that the Queen's speech contains this immigration bill, and that will make clear resident European citizens in this country and in my Winchester constituency who've built their lives in and contributed so much to the UK have the right to remain. Indeed, I note the gracious speech said this bill will include measures that, quotes, reinforce this commitment, which of course is excellent. Now, when the Minister responds to today's debate, I just would like to hear a little bit more about that. So I'm quite clear, and I know many of my constituents will share this wish. This shouldn't be something we're getting round to in late 2019, probably early 2020. The last government, and I know this is something that the Prime Minister said at the time, should have legislated right away to end the uncertainty our EU friends and neighbours living here have felt since June 2016. And I have many constituents who have contacted me to express that view. Secondly, Mr Deputy Speaker, Britain is known for many things around the world, and it's rightly looked up to. As a Health Minister, I was fortunate to represent our country at G7 and G20 meetings, and the experience of travelling wearing that NHS badge. So many countries are envious, and rightly so, of our NHS, and we're probably its harshest critics here domestically, and maybe that's how it should be. But when you talk around the world about the primary care services that we have and the GP service system that we have in this country, the cancer services that we have, the screening programmes that we have, we're the worst country in the world to influence the Fit Bowel Cancer Screening Programme, the immunisation programme that we have in this country. There are many, many things that Britain is rightly looked up to. Now, sure, the 2016 referendum was unusual for us as a country, and we don't need to rehearse all the arguments around our parliamentary democracy, like ours, has struggled to reconcile that exercise in direct democracy. but I really do believe we shouldn't overthink how others view us and how this episode has impacted our place in the world. It's been said many times, and I think it's worth repeating, that this House actually represents our country very well right now, divided as it is. And I think we will see on Saturday again how divided our society is outside of this building. Ours is a working democracy, and centuries of precedent and tradition, for my view, don't go bad in the space of 3, albeit feeling like very long years. So I don't, I'm afraid, share the view that we need to tear this House down, find our own founding fathers and write a constitution. Not yet, anyway. Surely the challenge of our current impasse has far more straightforward origins. As any student of politics learns, in the first module that they do about the House of Commons, this place works and the Prime Minister's power derives from having a majority in this place. And whether we like it or not, there will have to be a general election sooner or later. Now, whether that produces a result of any clarity, well, that's another matter. And third and finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, back to Brexit itself. I think we have to be honest and say that Brexit presents challenges and opportunities for Britain's place in the world, but I suspect how depends entirely on how this actually ends. Now, I voted Remain in 2016. I came to the conclusion on that because of the way I see our country as part of something greater than even Great Britain. I'm young, I'm generally internationalist in my outlook. I actually have no issue with freedom of movement. I was a health minister, I saw every day how our NHS needs the supply of labour. I'm actually not hung up on ceding an element of sovereignty to be a member state of the European Union. We do that as a member of other multinational organisations, including NATO, which, after all, has Article 5 as the cornerstone of its foundation, stating that an attack on one is an attack on all. And while I realise this is anathema to some in our country, and maybe even in this House, when I see the British Prime Minister sitting around the table at an EU summit, flanked by the big nations of Europe, and we being a big nation of Europe ourselves, I feel pride, not regret, at that situation. But our country made a choice, Mr Deputy Speaker, a choice we asked it to make. I may regret the results of the 2016 EU referendum, but I respect it, and we must carry it through, and we will make it work. Now, I realise that opponents of moderates have the luxury of taking a position from either end of the spectrum. We have the Brexit Party with its Get Brexit Done, and a clean break would just allow us to move on and put Brexit behind us. I think that is just plain wrong. It would resolve nothing and is only a recipe for much further uncertainty. Equally, the Liberal Party's view, and sadly they're not in the chamber, what a surprise, that we can just revoke Article 50 and pretend like Bobby Ewing coming out of the shower in Dallas that it never happened. As one constituent put to me last weekend, Mr Deputy Speaker, that's just not cricket. You have to move forward from where you are in life, not from where you wish to be. So, my view is that Britain's place in the world is strong, and I think it will remain so. It's changing, that's for sure, but I suspect when my children are my age, maybe standing in this House one day, this current time will just be one part of the story that is this ongoing, successful United Kingdom. Thank you.